Is this the dagger?
G'day guys, JB here coming at you with my round 9 review, my week 9 review for the 2024-25 NBA season. Christmas is upon us and the season is quote unquote about to begin, so we'll see how this one continues to pan out as the weeks go through. Some interesting stat lines, some interesting performances, and things are going to start to get very serious very, very soon. Christmas Day seems to be the day that the season is really taken for granted, or certainly taken more seriously, I should say. So we'll see how teams start to perform. We'll see who the matchups are. We'll see exactly who's going to step up and who exactly is going to step out. So without further ado, let's get into it. Let's get into my Week 9 review for the 2024-25 NBA season. Starting in the East, as always, and with the Atlanta Hawks. Finished the week 7th in the conference with a 1-2 record. Got the win against Minnesota. DeAndre Hunter, one of many players for the Hawks who just seemed to find a way to step up, step out and really get the job done. Nice week for him. 24 points, 4 rebounds and an assist. 0.3 steals on 2.3 turnovers. When you consider exactly what's going on there with Atlanta, you've got to be really, really thankful that you've got DeAndre Hunter as a second option. Most of the time he's really a third option. Sometimes he even plays fourth string, but he's a genuine second option for a lot of teams. And yet here he is being able to just pinch hit where he needs to and just score his points pretty casually at that. Really nice week for him. Atlanta, they're still yo-yoing a bit. I don't see them dropping any lower than an 8th seed at the moment, the way the East is unfolding. But there's still a little bit of pressure on them to perform. They've got to lock in defensively. They've got to keep that ball moving on the offensive end if they're going to be any threat come the postseason. Over to Boston, they maintain the second position in the conference, and it looks like that's just something they're going to keep doing for most of the year. 1-2 record on the week, defeated Chicago, and Jaylen Brown stepping out once again. 24.3 points, 5.7 rebounds, 5.3 assists to go with 1.7 steals. Again, I say it all the time, it's got to be a real blessing to have Jaylen Brown, a genuine top 10 player in the East, a genuine top 20 player in the league, a genuine All-NBA contender, just casually floating around, just casually being a part of your squad. For Boston, they've got the Sixth Man of the Year, no doubt, at the moment in Peyton Pritchard. They've got one of the MVP candidates there in Jason Tatum. And then you've got someone like a Jaylen Brown who very well himself can make an All-NBA team. You add in their defensive factor both on the perimeter and internally, and you just have to think that Boston are a team that's going to try and maintain and maybe kick in a little bit here after Christmas. We'll see how things start to pan out for them. To Brooklyn, 1-2 record on the week. They're 11th in the conference, got the win against Toronto. And Cam Johnson just continuing to be that guy right now. Dennis Schroeder has gone. Cam Thomas is injured. So Cam Johnson, good time for him to step up and step out. 23.3 points, 5.3 rebounds, 4.3 assists to go with a steal and 0.7 blocks on 3.3 turnovers. The only thing I will say is that Johnson's probably an example that I've talked about all throughout the year. When you've got a guy who is leading your team and he's putting up some numbers, you've got to question whether it's a quality of player, whether it's a quality of leadership that's getting this done. I mean, ultimately the issue right now is that Brooklyn are injured and Brooklyn have got pieces moving in and out of their lineup. One positive at the moment certainly has been Ben Simmons, and the fact that Simmons is trying to take a little bit more of a leadership role. And I think considering that Brooklyn look like they want to bottom out, it's a good chance for Simmons to try and apply some of his trade and get some looks back into his game. I don't know how that'll pan out for them, but it's a positive sign to see, albeit in what has turned into a negative situation at the moment. Charlotte, bad to worse. A bad week for them at 0-3. They're now 13th in the conference, and Miles Bridges, again, their best player on the week. 18.3 points, 7.7 rebounds, 4.3 assists to go with 0.7 steals and 0.7 blocks on 3 turnovers. Look, it was never going to be pretty for Charlotte, particularly when you start seeing LaMelo Ball's in and out of the lineup, when you see Brandon Miller's in and out of the lineup, and you don't really have much else going for you. It's always going to be troubling times. That's exactly what's happening to Charlotte right now. They started strong. We thought they would start okay. I didn't think we'd say they'd start strong. Wasn't a real chance of them holding on. Again, that's happened. They've fallen out. Their defense isn't great. They're relying on heavy offense. They're not getting the job done. In turn, they're not winning games. And it's going to be really interesting to see exactly what Charlotte do. They've gone all in on their current situation, but it's not a situation that you would have thought they'd have gone all in on. Nonetheless, they have. They're paying the price for it. We'll see whether they can come out the other side. To the Bulls, 9th in the conference, 1-2 on the week, defeated Boston. Zach LaVine, one of multiple double-digit scorers, playing nicely there. 21.3 points, 5.3 rebounds, 3.7 assists, 0.7 steals, and 2 turnovers. For the Bulls, again, it's just a matter of if and when with a lot of their trade conversations, because there's not much else they're doing. They're just sort of staying stuck in the mud. I mean, Chicago's realistically been an 8th to 10th seed. Since they acquired DeMar DeRozan, they had quite a number of fleeting runs where you thought they might get a little bit more of a jump, where you thought they might get on a bit of a roll, but it's not something that's ever happened to them. It's not something that looks like it's going to happen to them anytime soon. And if they're going to be settling with Josh Giddey and Kobe White, then maybe they need to get moving on everybody else. They're saying Vucevic is a genuine trade target there to Phoenix. I don't know about that. He would bring in a unique dynamic. I just don't know whether his passing game would be that of a Nurkic and exactly how he fits in with Durant and Booker. But interesting times ahead for the Bulls. Moving over to Cleveland, and they remain the number 1 seed in the East, and another good, solid week for them once again. 3-0, and Evan Mobley continues to make a case for all defensive selection, and for me, continues to make a case as an all-star player in 24-25. On the week, 19.7 points, 10 rebounds, 5 assists to go, 1 steal and 1.3 blocks on 1.7 turnovers. Evan Mobley probably should already be at this level. We should be talking about Evan Mobley as entering that multi-time all-star category. That multi-time all-defensive league sort of presence is now going to be there. But from an all-star standpoint, you would have thought that he would have got this last year. But it does speak about the depth of the Cavaliers. They've had a couple of run-ins with Boston so far. It's been an interesting matchup. The only thing that will really help Cleveland is the fact that Boston are happy to live by the 3 and die by the 3. For the Cavs, they have a couple of different options, and they certainly have as much of a presence defensively when they lock in. That's going to be a real classic top-of-the-table matchup in the East. Over to Detroit, 2-1 record. They still sit in the play-in, and as I mentioned previously, it's going to be really, really hard to have them be anything but a success story at this point this year. They're going to have to really fall out and end up as one of the 2 worst teams in the conference once again for that to happen. I don't see it happening purely because of the way they are playing. Got the wins over the Suns and the Lakers for a 2-1 record. Cade Cunningham really has a case right now as one of the top 20 players in this league, and you can make a genuine case with the way he's playing that he's had a top 10 season this year. The issue for me is where the Pistons sit, but if you're going to look at the improvement of the team, really nice year. 27 points, 3.3 rebounds, 10 assists a game on the week to go with 2 blocks and 1.3 steals. Turnovers are there, but so is the high usage. Detroit are clearly a better team when he's involved. He's clearly their max guy. Is there really a guy like Cade on every team? Not really, but he's really starting to live up to that contract, and that's a real positive for the Pistons moving forward. Over to Indiana, who are overcoming some real, what you would deem issues, and certainly a slow start to this season. They're now back up into 8th, and a team that, as I mentioned, when healthy can be a top 6 team, can be a contender in the East. They were an Eastern Conference finalist last year, albeit through injuries, but if the cards fall their way, they can certainly do it again. 3-0 record this week, so undefeated. Miles Turner, really, really nice week for him. 19 points, 7.3 rebounds, 1 assist to go 1 steal and 2.3 blocks on 2 turnovers. There have been conversations again about Miles Turner moving on, but the key thing with the Pacers right now is having that defensive presence, and that's exactly what Miles Turner brings. You've got a guy here that's going to be allow players to be filtered through to him in the paint. You've got a guy who can step out onto a stretch 4. He's a capable guard out there in a stretch 4. And the last thing they need to do is lose him. Halliburton hasn't been playing great. Siakam hasn't been playing great. Some of the pieces around them have been injured or underperforming. They get rid of Miles Turner, and this turnaround really doesn't look the same. He's key for their prospects moving forward. Speaking of key for prospects moving forward, that's Tyler Hero with the Miami Heat. A 1-2 record for them. 6th in the conference, got the win over Brooklyn. Of course, we know how Brooklyn are going this year, so you can make your own assumptions about that. But a nice week there by Hero. 22.3 points, 10 rebounds, 6.3 assists per game to go 1 steal, 0.3 blocks on 1.7 turnovers. And he's going to be absolutely the number 1 option on this team very, very soon. For Miami, Jimmy Butler has signalled that he wants out, and he wants out before the deadline. He's not willing to see the season out. He's not wanting to be traded post-season. He is wanting done before then. The question is, who are they going to bring in for Jimmy Butler? It's a real interesting headache to have, both for Miami and certainly for the opposition. There's no doubt Jimmy Butler likes those bright lights. He's led this Miami team to the NBA Finals twice. He's a capable headache to have. The issue is at his age, who do you get that is equal value or prosperous value moving forward, who can also partner up with someone like a Ban here. Going to be interesting for the Heat to see what they do in this trade. A real positive for Milwaukee this week. 5th in the conference, 2-1 record. Wins against Chicago and Washington. Yes, okay, it's against Chicago and Washington. But they didn't rely on Giannis Antetokounmpo to be the guy to get the wins for them. They were able to really go into their reserves, really go into their 3rd, 4th, 5th options to get the job done. Bobby Portis, a great example of that, had a nice standout week in a winning team. 20.7 points, 8.7 rebounds, 5.3 assists, 1.3 steals and 0.3 blocks. The key now for Milwaukee is seeing how all these pieces react now that they're in form, now that they're getting touches, and now that they're buying into a system. There's no doubt about it that Giannis Antetokounmpo is the best player on this team. He may very well be the best player in the Eastern Conference this year. He's right in that conversation. I would have him at worst top 2, top 3 in the conference right now. So you're always going to get a success story out of that. But the key right now, along with his scoring and his elite defensive presence, is getting others involved. Bobby Portis, a prime example of that right now. For Milwaukee, they've got to keep that habit going and keep getting guys involved. For New York, they keep trying to push up the ranks with one of the most potent offensive tandems that we've seen in the league, certainly for a single season at least, over the last 25 years with this man on screen, Karl-Anthony Towns, along with a Jalen Brunson. It's crazy to think that anyone would have thought Karl-Anthony Towns would have been a success in New York, particularly the way he can play, but he is really a man on a mission, proving that, hey, I can be a number 1 guy and I can be a force in this league. Undefeated record for New York this week, 3rd in the conference. Karl-Anthony Towns, not quite a 20-20 week, but 24.7 points, 13.3 rebounds, 5.7 assists to go, 1 steal, and 0.3 blocks on 3.3 turnovers. Ultimately here for Towns, he's really starting to show what he can be as a big man shooter, who's actually living up to that moniker that he gives as the greatest big man shooter of all time. You know, I think he's still got a lot of time to do that, but he's really living up to that reputation that he's trying to build and that expectation that is now being set upon him. For New York, it's really scary what they can do offensively, but I still worry defensively whether they're able to lock in with huge workloads on their stars. A guy here in Goga Bitadze has certainly been doing the rounds, and mainly doing the rounds from the Zion Williamson draft photo where he was sitting opposite in the press conference with no attention. Well, he's certainly getting the attention of the league now. He's starting to become key for an Orlando side that is heavily ravaged with injury right now, and we'll get to that in a second. 2-1 record on the week, 4th in the conference still. Defeated Miami and Boston, so really nice wins for a young side. Karl-Anthony with a really, really nice couple of games there. Bitadze consistent as well, 13.7 points, 10.7 rebounds, 2.3 assists to go, 0.7 steals and 1.7 blocks. The big issue they now have is not only is Franz Wagner out till at least, you would say, the end of January, or certainly after the All-Star break, but you now have Mo Wagner gone for the season with an ACL injury. So the injuries are now piling up. Who's the guy that's going to step up and step out? Bitadze needs to be that guy. Can he be consistently? I don't know, but he'll certainly be welcoming the relief of Franz Wagner, Paulo Banchero as soon as he can. Philadelphia, they're starting to make a bit more of a run. They're still 12th in the conference, but if they're able to get their star power back and continue to get that consistency on board, then they're going to be a bit of a different beast. They could be a team that does actually sneak into the play-in and could cause some headaches if they are healthy, fit, and firing, and that's the crucial part there. 2-1 record on the week. Defeated Charlotte and San Antonio. Nice battle there with San Antonio. Charlotte, a win that they should have definitely got. Tyrese Maxey just continuing to be that leader, though. 27.3 points, 5 rebounds, 5.7 assists to go, 1.7 steals, and 0.3 blocks and 1.3 turnovers. It's really hard when you've got a team that includes Paul George, a team that includes Joel Embiid, a team with veterans such as Kyle Lowry on it, and Andre Drummond, to really want to buy into these young guys and let them take the lead. But I think right now, from a safety standpoint, you need to be able to give as much responsibility as you can to a Tyrese Maxey. You've got old guys who are slow, who are injury prone. You're not going to make the playoffs based on that, but you do give yourself every chance if you keep giving Maxey the ball. Over to the Raptors, who, as we've seen for weeks now, when someone like a Scotty Barnes or even someone like an RJ Barrett, who to me is probably starting to lose a bit of that luster as the Raptors lose their luster, when you've got guys like that are somewhat in control of your offense and in control of your team, you certainly have a better chance at a result. Unfortunately, though, it does say a fair bit, and that's nothing against our man Jacoby Walter on screen. The results speak for themselves. 0-3 record, 14th in the conference, no wins on the week. Jacoby Walter, though, nice week for him. 16.7 points, 2.3 rebounds, 1.7 assists to go to 0.7 blocks as well. Less than a turnover, so efficient with his time in possession. I do rate that, a young guy that's having a crack. But as we've spoken about all year, the success of your team is usually predicated by your best player. It's nothing against Jacoby Walter, but he's not experienced enough to really step up from the bench and have an impact like that. Scotty Barnes, RJ Barrett, they need to be the guys. Jakob Poeltl at the very least, and that hasn't happened this week here for Toronto. Finally, in the East, the worst team in the league. Jordan Poole throwing shots up left, right and centre. At some point, you're going to let mud stick to the wall. 28 points, 3.7 rebounds, 4.7 assists to go 1.3 steals and 1 block on 4.3 turnovers. They got 1 win this week. They defeated Charlotte. I don't think there's much more to say about the worst team in the NBA than they beat one of the most discombobulated franchises of the last decade who have found no consistency despite a couple of star players. They're still the worst team in the league. There's not much else to say. Moving to the Western Conference, we'll start with the Dallas Mavericks, who currently sit 4th in the Western Conference and have made a real strong run towards the end of December. They're really trying to position themselves for a nice finish towards the All-Star break and certainly look to capitalise moving forward. 2-1 record on the week, defeated the Trailblazers and the Clippers. Klay Thompson, his best week for the franchise, in my opinion, really stepping up where he needs to, not only as that pinch hitter on the offensive end, but certainly still being a presence defensively as well. 17 points, 2 rebounds, 2 assists to go with 2.7 steals and 2 turnovers a game. For Klay, this is the perfect ideal. This is the situation that he similarly had when the Warriors won the title in 2022, where he could be that 3rd or 4th scoring option. He could still run the floor either side. He could still play a bit of defense. He could still get involved in other aspects. That's going to be key for Dallas if they're able to really harness that and get him involved. It's a matter of Klay, though, at age and injuries for him to be and display some consistency in that role. To Denver, they have taken a bit of a rise in the standings and they are making things more and more viable for the man on screen in not only their quest to make the playoffs, but certainly at this point I think their quest to cement Jokic as, well, pretty much the best centre that the league has seen since Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and lock him into one of the 10 greatest players of all time categories. 5th in the conference, 2-1 record, defeated New Orleans and Phoenix. Nikola Jokic had an underwhelming week by his standards, both on the glass and somewhat in the passing as well. 31, 7 and 8.3 for the week, along with 0.7 steals, 0.3 blocks on 2.3 turnovers. We've seen a couple of weeks now where other guys are getting involved. They're being consistent and they're impacting the game. Some of that is coming from Jokic, but some of that is guys that are readjusting to the way this game is being played around the big man. And that's exactly what Denver are going to need. They've lost some guys due to cash options. They've lost some guys due to free agency. They need to rebuild that there. Someone like a Westbrook has been extraordinary for this team in rebuilding it. It's a matter of them staying consistent and staying focused moving forward. For Golden State, they are somewhat clinging on. Brandon Podziemski, their best player this week in their win against Minnesota. Their only win for the week, but Podziemski on the week. 12.7 points, 5.7 rebounds, 3 assists, 2.3 steals. Here's a guy that gets up and down the floor. He's efficient, doesn't really turn the ball over. Had a really nice rookie year last year. He certainly stepped up from that, showing improvement, taking steps, and moving forward, which is exactly what this team needs. The only worry for someone like a Podziemski is the fact that he would be involved in the trade if they were going to try and acquire someone or acquire people that were going to assist the Warriors in a potential title hunt, but a nice week by him. Golden State, I think it's put up or shut up for them. They're either going to have to make this trade that they're talking about, whether that's with a superstar player or whether that's just for a couple of pieces around them, or they're just going to have to ride this thing out. The ultimate goal right now for Steph Curry is to get a 5th title. How they do that, I don't know. Do they team up with another guy chasing a 5th title? Who knows? Over to the Rockets, 3-0 record, and they have moved back up into the 2nd seed of the Western Conference, a team that very much unlikely to be in this position at the start of the year, although as a Rockets fan, I'm certainly not against it. Alperen Şengün continues to be their best player, the most consistent player, and a guy who's certainly right there for me in all NBA second team discussions. Of course, trying to get the centre position away from Jokic is going to be nigh impossible. But the way he's playing and leading his team, he's certainly in the MVP conversation. Not at the top of it, but certainly has to be considered. 18.7 points, 9 rebounds, 5.3 assists for the big man to go with a steal and 1.3 blocks on 2 turnovers. They've clearly established a pecking order here. They understand how important Şengün is. But with the way that the Houston Rockets play their game, they don't need Şengün to be a 25-point per game night player. You've got someone like a Dylan Brooks who consistently steps up. Van Vliet, former All-Star. Jalen Green, capable All-Star. Jayshawn Tate, Tari Eason, Armin Thompson, all these guys that are able to play and get the job done is because someone like Şengün is selfless in his position. To the Clippers, the first of two teams we always cover out in Los Angeles. 2-1 record. They've moved to 6th in the conference, and some nice scalps there as well, defeating Dallas and Memphis. Norman Powell continues to have a nice breakout season. Clippers fans have been loving this guy for a while. I haven't been too far away from being a fan myself, particularly in the Toronto days. But a guy who's really stepping out, and a really nice week for him. 28.7 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists to go with 2 steals and 0.3 blocks. I mean, here's a guy that's really relishing the fact that James Harden's on this team, and I think this speaks to the fact that Harden would have been a better point guard than he would have been a shooting guard. Also speaks to the fact that someone like a Zubac is creating some space and really causing some havoc as well. He's not necessarily the number one focus of the defense every single night, so he's able to really produce. He's been an all-star this year, there's no doubt about it. The only thing that's going to hurt him is exactly as Charles Barkley said. The problem with people is that they don't watch games, they only vote for household names, they don't know who's playing well. Norman Powell, unfortunately, is going to fall into that category. He should be an all-star. On the other side of things, we're talking about household names, and here's a guy that's arguably the greatest player that's ever played the game, who will definitely walk into his all-star selection, even though personally I don't think that he's been one of the 12 best players in the West. Controversial thought for most people. He certainly hasn't been the best player on his team this year, but he's had some really good streaks, and there's no doubt about it, can still turn it on when he needs to. It's just how often that he chooses to flick that switch. 2-1 record, 7th in the conference for the Lakers, 2 wins against the Kings. Speaking of Kings, it's LeBron James. 26.3 points, 8 rebounds, 8 assists, to go 1.3 steals and 0.3 blocks on 2.7 turnovers. Nice little regroup there for the Lakers, but they're still stuck in playing territory, and realistically, outside of one season, that's exactly where they've been. This hasn't been a team that's genuinely threatened for a title, and everyone that wants to try and claim that they have, well, that 4-0 series against the eventual champions wasn't that much of a contest. You've just got to be honest with yourself. Lakers still floating in the play-in, but a nice turnaround week for LeBron. Moving on over to a team that genuinely is a contender right now, and that's purely because they're playing a style of ball that no one else is. 2-1 record here for Memphis on the week, 3rd in the conference, defeated Golden State and Atlanta. And Desmond Bane, a guy who got no flowers for his efforts last year, got injured, no one cared, and he's now flying under the radar once again, but he's continuing to have an impact on this Memphis team. A guy that would have been the most improved player in the league the year Ja Morant won it, if it wasn't for Ja Morant. But a nice week again for Bane. 19.7 points, 6 rebounds, 7.3 assists to go with 2.3 steals. Here's a guy that if he's on any other team, probably has a Norman Powell role, probably has an RJ Barrett role where they absolutely stand out, they perform, they put up the numbers, they have an impact, and guys start voting for them and recognising their game. Unfortunately for Bane, he's just stuck in that bane of existence, no pun intended, behind Jaren Jackson Jr. and Ja Morant. He's caught in the shuffle. But it's not a bad shuffle to be in, a top 3 team in the West, allowing you to play your own natural game and helping build a contender. Tough week in Minnesota, and that's got nothing to do with the fact that they're in Minneapolis. 0-3 week, 10th in the conference, no wins, and Julius Randle, their standout player, not necessarily a good thing this week either. 19.7 points, 8.3 rebounds to go with 5.3 assists, 0.3 blocks on 5.3 turnovers. There's not really much else to say. Karl-Anthony Towns has just absolutely made them regret getting rid of him. And they had to, because his contract's going to be huge. I mean, that's a New York level contract. That's a big market contract when you look at what they want versus what they were getting. But now all of a sudden, Karl-Anthony Towns looks like one of the 5 best players in the NBA. Is making a genuine MVP case out in the Eastern Conference next to a Giannis and a Jason Tatum. And someone like a Julius Randle, yeah, he's coming in and playing some minutes, but he's not really standing out. He's not being as effective as people want him to be. Couple the fact that the blame game is going to Gobert and Anthony Edwards isn't necessarily doing anything, and Minnesota just looks stuck in the mud once again. Here's a team that's not only stuck in the mud, but it's been swallowed by quicksand, and it's certainly not getting out of the swamp anytime soon. A really nice week, though, here by Trey Murphy for New Orleans. Didn't get any wins, and they are still dead, stone, motherless last. And extremely happy that someone like Utah is just underperforming. Someone like Portland can't get it together. Otherwise, they'd stick out a little bit more beyond their injuries. A nice week by Trey Murphy 25 points, 5 rebounds, 2.7 assists to go with 1 steal and 0.7 blocks on 2.3 turnovers. I got no doubt, if New Orleans were fit, if New Orleans were healthy, they'd start clicking. They'd be a bit more of a talk of the league. Your Brandon Ingrams, your Zion Williamson, Deontay Murray, someone here like a Trey Murphy, a Deontay Murray, they would really start clicking and you'd see a lot more about this team. But the sheer fact of the matter is they've been injured, and young guys like this are going to have to step up in the absence of some stars, and it's a role they're not necessarily used to. That's exactly what's happening right now here for New Orleans, and it's pretty sad to see. But what is not sad to see, though, is the performance of the Oklahoma City Thunder, and a guy who would no doubt be the absolute runaway favourite for the MVP in not only this year but certainly last year if it wasn't for a guy in Denver putting up career best numbers after having already won 3 MVPs. Undefeated record here for OKC, number 1 in the conference. They certainly look like they're going to be the favourite coming out of the West, and they may very well be a title favourite, particularly when you look at the fact that GIlgeous-Alexander is going on a run for a shooting guard that we haven't seen since Kobe, and you'd have to argue maybe since Mike. But he's not flashy, and everyone just wants to point to the fact he goes to the free throw line. Quick fact on that. This is the lowest rate of free throws that GIlgeous-Alexander's had in the 3 years he's averaged 30 for OKC and being an All-NBA first-team member. Quiet week, 33.7 points, 6.7 rebounds, 4.3 assists, 3 steals, 1.7 blocks, 3.3 turnovers. The best perimeter player in the NBA. And you go from an undefeated record, someone like OKC absolutely sandwiched between defeated records, no wins this week, and an 11th place in the conference here for Phoenix, who are at a crossroads and right now sounds like they want to start moving some pieces sooner rather than later. Those pieces being Bradley Beal and the other piece being a Jusuf Nurkic. I mean, it's really convenient. The 2 stars of this team certainly are not putting their hand up and saying, hey, let's keep our pieces, we've got to be better. Certainly seems they're just on title hunt, and I get it, they're competitive, but for this guy on screen, it really does scream about the lack of leadership that has constantly been there despite his elite level of talent. Kevin Durant, 34.3 points, 8 rebounds, 4.7 assists, 1.7 steals, 0.3 blocks, 5.3 turnovers on the week. Phoenix right now, from what I can gather in conversation, want Jimmy Butler and Nikola Vucevic. Now, I've got no doubt that if you can get them on the same page and they're going to be competitive, that makes Phoenix a far better team. But they've got to be healthy, they've got to be responsible, and they've got to take action. If they don't do that, they're just another team in the mix. Had it not been, or if it hasn't been, for Utah just simply underperforming and New Orleans being one of the most injured teams from a salary standpoint in recent league history, then we'd be talking about Portland being a severe underperformer and just the consistency of the drizzles. You can work out what I mean by that. 13th in the conference, a win this week, defeated Denver, ironically, but Shaedon Sharpe still stepping up, stepping out. A guy that a lot of pundits on the internet and certainly on TV seem to feel that they've been following for some time and feel that he's only just coming into his own, despite the fact that he had a really nice, consistent year last year as well. 21.7 points, 3.7 rebounds, 2.3 assists there for Sharpe to go, 1.3 steals, 0.7 turnovers. Again, for Portland, it's just going to be one of those things where I think they're going to have to stick to these young guys. They're going to have to try and find a bit of identity, a bit of passion, and to really just try and rebrand this franchise at the moment, because the pieces they've got are capable. They just don't all seem to fit. I don't know what sort of marketing they're going to have to do for that, but I think ultimately that's what it's going to come down to. Try and build a bit of a reputation as a team, see if you can string some wins together from there. Speaking of marketability and identities that really made a team for, well, a season and a half, not many beam lights this week. In fact, no beam lights at all. 0-3 record, 12th in the conference. The Sacramento Kings, a team that is still floating around 500, but has probably the most potent offensive lineup in the league when they really want to be on in Keegan Murray, De'Aaron Fox, Malik Monk, DeMar DeRozan, and Domantas Sabonis. But the problem is they just can't defend a lick, and it's been the ultimate criticism of Sacramento for the last couple of seasons when they've tried to make runs about having guys that can actually get shots up and defend shots on the other end of the floor. Don't get me wrong, I don't mind De'Aaron Fox as a steal guy and a guy who can play the passing lanes, but he's certainly not a lockdown defender, and that's just becoming more and more evident as the years go on. Interesting to see that they kept him, and from an offensive standpoint I see it. Defensively, I certainly don't. For the week though, 26.7 points, 4.3 rebounds and 6.3 assists to go 1.7 steals and 3.3 turnovers. They need to hurry up and defend something really quickly, or they will be in some serious trouble out there in the West. I actually can't believe the stat line that I'm about to read to you from a sophomore level player. I'm just going to let it sit on screen for a little bit for you to take in absorb. 2-1 record, 9th in the conference. They defeated the Hawks. They defeated Portland. Victor Wembanyama on the week, 32.7 points, 7 rebounds, 4.3 assists, 0.7 steals, 3.7 turnovers, but the man averaged 7.3 block shots a game. Wemby right now is on pace to be the first player since Dikembe Mutombo in 1995-96 to average 4 blocks a game. Couple that with the offensive prowess that he has shown this year and the turnaround the Spurs are having, albeit with Chris Paul. Victor Wembanyama has been a top 10 player in the league, but no one's watching the Spurs. But I will give the Spurs one thing. While they're known and not watched, no one knows the Utah Jazz, and I can guarantee you no one's watching the Utah Jazz. 2-1 record this week, albeit. Production there from Colin Sexton, 24 points, 3.7 rebounds, 5.7 assists, 2.7 steals, 5.7 turnovers. Defeated Detroit and Brooklyn. But the only reason that they're 14th is because New Orleans aren't healthy. They signed all these guys. They wanted to guarantee them money. They wanted to get some results out of them. But they've gone from, hey, let's be really competitive to, we're going to score Cooper Flag. In about 5 games, they made that decision this year, which is pretty sad considering the max money that they've signed Lauri Markkanen to. I know they've had injury concerns. I know they've had consistency concerns. But you can't sit there on a buy-in on a team and not deliver a result of some sort. That's exactly what Utah are doing right now. Nothing short of pathetic is the best way to put it. Second worst team in basketball for me. Washington taking the cake. Anyway, guys, that's been me. That is my Week 9 review for the 24-25 NBA season. Some really interesting results, some really interesting standings, some really interesting performances, some all-time elite level performances, and some really run-of-the-mill pedestrian efforts. Let me know what you think of that one there. We're heading into Christmas Day. This is recorded post-Christmas, might I add. However, those games will be covered next week. Plenty of interesting points around that. I just think Christmas Day is another day. Game-wise, it just has a spectacle because it gets eyeballs. That's about the difference. And the league saying the season doesn't matter until then, which means if they were going to shorten the season, everyone realistically would probably only play 58 games. Yep, it'd be high octane. It'd be pretty boring though. I'd prefer a season with a bit of length. I'm pretty traditionalist in that sense, as well as the way I tend to want to present my stuff. Anyway, guys, that's been me. I'm out.